In the case of Euro Disney, the first factor that contributed to its poor performance was the failure of adapting culturally, which led to having wrong assumptions about the French habits. They did not consider any local habits, which looked to the French as if they were enforcing the American culture in a rude way. They banned wine, they enforced strict American grooming standards for the employees, and made assumptions like Europeans don't eat breakfast, which caused frustration in the French. They also invested in transportation inside the park, and French preferred walking. They are fast and took a minimum of 2 days visiting, which was also misread by Disney. Lastly, the prices were too high for hotels and tickets to different areas of the park, making the French compare prices and see that even traveling to Disney in California was cheaper. The biggest lesson they learned was that guests need to be welcome to the parks on the basis of their own culture and travel habits. The lesson was that elements of cultural consumer habits have to be considered when open a new park. But they took it way too far and literally in the case of Hong Kong. Here, the factors that led to its poor performance start with the lack of brand awareness and connection. Disney characters were banned for decades in China, resulting in zero connection of Chinese people and Disney characters, unlike Japan's case. The park was also too small and simple and look alike to China parks because of the infrastructure being way too similar. People expected something differently and they wanted the fairy tale Disney factor that was taken away because they were now forcing too much to blend into the culture. Advertising and marketing efforts also showed large families which didn't match China's one child policy, making no connection with Chinese people as it was not reflective of the culture. So they took this learning of Paris way too literally, and they should have seen that even Japan's case, Paris' case, and Hong Kong's case are differently. So they need to first do a study to see what cultural things to take and which ones do not take. So that's what went wrong. I believe all of the factors were controllable and foreseeable except for two external factors. This led to having a high cost to change their mistakes instead of paying attention before. They could have been controlled before with strong market studies and consumer behavior. Their biggest mistake was to assume that every learning in each market applies to every market. In the case of Japan, they learned that they wanted to live the American experience and loved the Disney characters, so not making any changes was a successful tactic. In the case of Paris, they took it as if the American culture was being enforced to them and their culture, and they weren't considered. They learned that travel factors and consumer behaviors can affect how they view the experience. And in Hong Kong, they learned that they cannot take it too far to blend in the culture and losing their fairy tale brand experience. So it's important to deliver the right message in marketing and educate them about their characters. Otherwise, there is no relevance. Markets and consumers react differently, and they cannot assume tactics and learnings in one market will work on another one. The external factors that were not controllable and not foreseeable were the COVID pandemic and European recession, along with the Gulf War. The rest of them, I believe, are controllable and foreseeable by both Disney Hong Kong and Paris and the parent company, communicating insights from each culture to the parent company for decision making. It's important.
Disney assumed that their successful model in the US and Japan would work the same in France, without adapting anything to local culture. They misunderstood local habits, like thinking Europeans didn't eat breakfast. They used American style communication that didn't connect with French people, and they set high hotel prices and offered food that didn't match European tastes. All of this caused a cultural disconnection and a poor reception of the park. At first, Disney cross cultural marketing skills were really weak. This caused serious financial losses, but after learning from their mistakes, they improved a lot. They changed to a localized marketing strategy, adapting messages to each country. In Hong Kong, well, in the Hong Kong of Disneyland, for example, they included Chinese culture, local food, and communication based on local values. By making these changes, Disney showed that they can adapt their marketing to different cultures successfully.
Now, moving on to question 5, we will analyze why the success in Tokyo predisposed Disney management to be too optimistic in its expectations of success in France and in China. So, as my colleagues just said, the incredible success of Tokyo Disneyland gave Disney a false sense of confidence. In Japan, for example, Disney had a strong emotional connection with the audience already. So, when they introduced the park, it was a success immediately. And the characters like Mickey and Donald were already integrated into the Japanese culture. And for example, school trips and repeated visitors made the park thrive. Disney assumed this cultural magic would naturally transfer also to France and to China, which was wrong. They failed to realize that France had its own cultural icons and saw Disney as a part of the American imperialism. And in China, Disney characters were not known by the people due to the decades of restrictions that they had. So Disney didn't adjust its strategy accordingly, believing that the American dream would itself be attractive in France and also in China. This overconfidence led to a disappointment, of course, and financial trouble of the two parks. Other points that are important to understand to answer this question 5 is that in Tokyo, the people and the culture had already a strong emotional tie to Disney stories and characters. In the spending theme, families in Tokyo were able to spend up to $600 to enter to the parks, which wasn't the same situation in the other countries. And also, in Tokyo, Japanese valued the American pop culture, so Disney assumed that it would be the same in France and in China. Now, moving on to question 6. Although Disney faced major cultural and financial issues in France, it surprisingly repeated the same mistake in Hong Kong. They again underestimated the cultural differences and assumed the Disney brand would be recognized anywhere universally and that it would be understood by all the people. In China, most visitors didn't grow up with Disney characters or Disney films or the stories, etc. And the park size felt underwhelming compared to all the offer that there was in the place. They even launched ads showing 2 children, where it is well known that most families in China only have 1 child. So, Shanghai shows that Disney finally started learning after, and they consulted feng shui experts, respected the Chinese holidays, offered local foods that the people were used to and that they liked, and designed attractions in multiple languages so all the people would feel integrated to the offer that Disney was making in their country. That's why Shanghai had a much stronger start than the other parks, and it's positioned itself for long-term success. So, why did the French experience didn't help? Because Disney didn't fully accept that the core issue wasn't operational, it was cultural. So they made some logistical changes after France, but they didn't internalize the need to deeply understand the culture of each market and the identity that they had. In Hong Kong, they repeated the same mistake, assuming that what worked in the US would work in Japan or globally, anywhere. It was until Shanghai that they truly embraced the localization as a strategy and as a part of their expansion progress, and not just as damage control over the years.
If Disney is planning its next big move, 3 cities stand out as Sao Paulo, Mumbai, and Toronto. Sao Paulo has a massive population and a big Disney fan base, but economic instability and pricing challenges make it a little bit risky. Mumbai is booming with a rising middle class and exciting potential for local storytelling, but infrastructure and a crowd control would be thought. Then there's Toronto, economically strong, super diverse, and already in love with Disney. The cold weather is a factor, but indoor attractions and seasonal events can easily solve that. So if Disney wants stability, strong returns, and a ready market, Toronto is the clear winner for Disneyland X. Let's break down what Disney's learned from its global parks and why it matters for the next one. In France, they didn't respect local culture, like no wine, strict rules, and backfired. Lesson learned, you have to adapt. Japan was the opposite. People already loved Disney, and the park fit the culture perfectly. Cultural fit and brand love is success. Hong Kong made cultural changes like Feng Shui and local food, but struggled because people didn't know the characters. So, what's the takeaway from the next Disney park? To work, they need to localize everything like food, languages, costumes, while keeping the Disney magic alive. And, well, thank you for watching.